Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. On the program today, we're going to be talking about how we can understand our body's unique biology by interpreting its signals and dietary needs to hone in on the perfect foods for best health ever. You can have a body by design, so our guest will tell us, when you choose to eat and live wisely, creating a harmonious balance of biology, emotions, and thoughts for stress-free living and graceful aging. I think a lot of us, by the time we reach midlife, would love to have graceful aging. On the program today, we're going to be listening to Deborah O'Brien. She is a certified food and health and life coach. She works out of Portland, Oregon and the surrounding areas, and we're going to talk about how we can achieve these wonderful goals of self-assessment. Deborah, how are you today?
Hi, Daniel. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much. Now, when you talk about something like this, it's pretty much becoming pretty well known that one size doesn't fit all, that not everyone can eat the same food and have the same results. Is that true?
Yeah, that seems to be true, and more people are discovering that dietary theories aren't, a one-size-fits-all type of a proposition. And it's interesting that, as I learned through the integrative nutrition approach, that and through coaching different people in their diet, that each person has unique needs, and their biological system has a different response to different types of foods. That's why, but there are certain things that are more uniform, that are becoming more mainstream and more predominantly a problem, and that's the GMO foods and hybridized wheat. But mostly it's about people's unique history. Mm-hmm. And each person has a unique history in the way they've eaten all their lives and as children. And that's created the current biology that they have today, mm-hmm. the way they've eaten all their lives, basically.
It's really fascinating, too, to know that there are times that people don't really know their food, like where does it come from, how is it raised, those sort of things there. Tell us why that's important.
Yeah, it's extremely important because the food has become really complicated today. The issue of choosing right foods is really important to either sustaining vibrant health, or it can go the other way. It can make you really sick. And there are foods out there that are making people pretty sick. And the problem with that is that doctors really don't identify that based on symptoms when they go to a doctor for a condition. They give drug treatments for relief of symptoms, but they're not really identifying the cause. And unfortunately, the cause is in our food sources. And there's so much weird stuff they're putting in food, and processed foods particularly have a lot of stuff that if you read labels, you can't even pronounce or identify. And this has been going on for generations, but it's become even more of a challenge because of these genetically modified organisms that they're doing the weird stuff with food crops and seeds, injecting neurotoxins into the seed to prevent bugs from eating the crop, and those are pesticides. And it is accumulative in our bodies. Over time, it does accumulate in the fat cells of our body. And unfortunately, our brains are the largest fatty organ, 66% fat. Mm-hmm. So toxins do tend to end up in the brain and in other parts of our body where there's fat.
Now, it's really fascinating, too, when you talk about how people tend to, that they buy processed food, as though I need something that I can prepare fast and easy, and sometimes they can't identify with everything that's in it. Then years down the road, of course, they start getting sick, or there's just a slew of different things that begin to happen due to the layers of habit. Now, generally, when you begin to work with people, tell us how your approach to health coaching might be different from people who actually do the very same thing.
Well, I believe each person has an inner guidance system that once they tune in, they can begin to identify what the signals their bodies are giving them, what they mean. and because each of us, we've just disconnected from our biosystem, and the only time we really pay attention is when it's giving us distress, causing distress. If your digestion's off, then you eat an antacid or something, or and you're not identifying with too much with the food that you ate, or how it was prepared, and the source of where it was grown and processed. We have animal products that are extremely toxic in terms of emotional content. The animals are treated badly, and it actually, there's energy in their tissues when they kill these animals, when they slaughter the animals. I know this sounds extreme, but it is something to pay attention to, because animals are creatures of intelligence, and we don't, and the food industry doesn't treat them as such. And but there are a lot of reasons that our bodies start breaking down, and our moods are affected, and our thought processes by the foods we eat, and that's really important to pay attention to as well.
Mm-hmm. I know that I myself have seen many a documentary when it comes to food and food processing, and it's just sometimes very alarming to realize, for instance, that they can grow a chicken to the size they do from the time that it hatches to a point where the breasts of the chicken become so overwhelmingly large that the bird literally falls over forward. Yeah. And you got to realize, taking a look at that that can't be a good thing.
Right. They're doing weird stuff with the animals, and it's also affecting us, and we need to start paying attention, because we're, even our thought processes and emotions, moods, impact the food choices too, because often people get caught up in cycles of eating too much sugar or wheat, and those two are the most predominant foods that people can get caught in cyclic behavior of eating and binging on, and without really noticing, and it really does have ends up having a pretty bad effect on your biology. Your pancreas and insulin, become overloaded. The system starts to break down. It's not processing. The blood sugars go higher, and people start getting diabetic and symptoms of diabetes. And this happens without any warning. Oftentimes, people don't know what's going on until they go to the doctor. And it's really about being more mindful and making better choices in the moment. But also with produce, you've got to eat produce that's grown in the right conditions and not farmed by genetic modification processes, because there's a product called glyphosate that's being overwhelmingly sprayed on conventionally grown crops. It's an herbicide that's very dangerous. It's almost as bad as the DDT they used to spray on the jungles or in the crops back in the 70s too. Mm-hmm.
How did you decide to get started in this field here to help people? Was there something that had happened where you said, I need to go out there and pretty much advocate and go in this direction?
Well, I've got a background in real estate, and I worked in real estate on the Oregon coast for 18 years, and I raised 3 girls on a farm, and my mom used to can food, and we'd go out in the fields and get the food in the summers and harvest and can foods and pickles and tomatoes and pears, peaches, applesauce, stuff like that, and it was a really good lesson for me on where the food comes from, and just when I cook, then I know where it's come from, where it, I actually had a hand in it, and so I did that with my children on the farm, and while selling real estate and doing the other things I did during those years, I've always kept in a really healthy state, and had an interest in things like why doctors create the diagnosis that they do, and where it comes from, and what they do to treat the diagnosis. And oftentimes I feel that, I mean, I learned through experience with a daughter that diagnosis isn't always accurate with doctors, and that oftentimes a person can self-regulate rather than take medications.
Mm-hmm.
Medications, overprescription or complications from drug interactions is the third leading cause of death in the United States. It's called iatrogenic disease, and it's
one
the
of them
third
tough
leading
words
cause
you
of
might find on a processed food box, it sounds like.
No, and you wouldn't know that, and you wouldn't know that because of the foods you're eating, it's causing all these chronic disease symptoms that you go and get prescription drugs for, like statin drugs and blood pressure and heart disease drugs and drugs that for diabetes that if you just change your diet you wouldn't need, and that's really what it comes down to is healthy living and being able to self-assess.
Mm-hmm. Also fascinating. Tell us how, it's interesting to really pay attention because you help teach people to do self-assessments. But when it comes to eating, is to pay attention how you feel after you've had whatever the meal may be. And I know that a lot of times people will say something like after having lunch, they just feel like taking a nap. And that really shouldn't be the way things are, is it?
Yeah, that's true. But the digestion process takes a whole lot of energy.
Right.
And so chewing your food longer actually helps with the digestion process because your saliva actually breaks down the food pretty efficiently and starts pulling nutrients when the food's in your mouth. So a lot of people gulp their food down and then their stomachs are overloaded with the processing of the food and then they get exhausted. And the food sources don't have the nutrients they used to have. Particularly the conventionally grown foods that are genetically modified, they alter the genetics in the food. So often our bodies don't recognize that alteration because we have a biology that's our own and that's actually created to eat other natural biology. So why would you want to put something that's not natural in your body that your body is not going to recognize or utilize properly? That's why organics are the best way to eat.
Mm-hmm. I know myself, once in a great while I might go out for breakfast and it's the typical hash brown, egg, and sausage sort of a thing, and by the time I'm finished I'm thinking, well, it's time to head back home for a nap. But yet, usually when I start the day, I tend to like to do green fruit smoothies. And what's nice is that you feel full from those things, but you don't feel that drain that you tend to feel like if you have that big, heavy-duty breakfast. So, how you feel after you eat is pretty important, especially when it comes to your mood and how you think and what you do next, isn't it?
That's absolutely right. And if you have to go to work or do any kind of a job, or get out behind the wheel of a car, you want to be alert and intelligent and paying attention. And if your food isn't doing that for you, then you're just not living on the right level. You're not living up to your standard to the best that you can be, and that's important. And our thought processes and emotions sometimes get in the way of the food choices, and we kind of get stuck in patterns of comfort foods and things that we just tend to binge sometimes, and a little bit of that is okay, once in a while to have sweets, but we want to, be mindful of what we're doing, and that's really the key is to pay attention and notice. And so also based on the interesting work of Dr. Bruce Lipton, our biology is affected by our emotions and our thoughts. Our cells are intelligent, and they have a response to negativity and hostility and anything that's coming at it that doesn't recognize as something that's beneficial, like nutrients and positive thoughts and energy. And I do energy work. I'm a Reiki master, so I guess I talk a lot about energy, but it's because it makes sense to me. And I believe that he's right on when he spoke in his book about the effect of energy on the cells of our body. What we get exposed to on a daily basis in terms of energy affects our biology, and our thoughts and emotions are a part of that too.
It's also fascinating to realize how just changing what you eat and how much you eat and probably frequency or when you eat can actually change your mindset. And you can have better days than you probably were before, huh?
That's true. You know, you get to choose. Basically, you're the captain of the ship. You know, you get to choose everything. Your thoughts, your emotions, everything is under your control, or should be. If it isn't, and there's something that's getting in the way of you making change, then I have these techniques I use, neuro-linguistic programming and the way of the heart, that really help to, guide people to empowerment through self-assessment of, like, what's the program that's in the way? You know, what's really going on here? And what's prohibiting you from really feeling fully, enrolled in this new path of health and making change? And, so they identify it, we work with that. There's parts integration with NLP, which brings out the rowdy rebel part that doesn't go along with the rest of the whole's intention, and we put it back together. And that way, when we bring wholeness in intention, you're a lot more empowered to make positive change in the desire of your heart.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting to think as people grow older is that they sometimes get stuck into habits that perhaps somebody else showed them, as they were growing up. They were just ways that they learned how to do things. Do you find that maybe it's quite a challenge for someone who wants to make these changes to actually make them? Or when you implement the process that you do, does it feel like, I could do this? It's not that hard.
Each person's so different, and I had a client that whizzed through a 3-month program, meeting every 2 weeks, and by the end of the program, he had lost 15 pounds, and he didn't have any relationship with cooking healthy food, and by the time he was done, he was cooking organic vegetables and eating fruits and doing smoothies and felt good and lost the weight and had a lot more energy and just, it was great. And he took it on, full on. He was just, I'm ready to change. And I have another client that's, we're processing through a lot of stuff. She's got, things she's been holding on to that she didn't know was there, that we're working on integrating to bring her back to wholeness so that she can make a much more empowered effort towards change in her diet. And so everybody's a little different in that process.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a couple of signals for our listeners out there that we can pay attention to our bodies to, move away from not feeling so good to feeling good.
Well, I'd say definitely the wheat.
Mm-hmm.
The wheat is a big deal, and it's not just a fad. It's not about the gluten. The wheat is bad, and in America, it's 100% genetically engineered wheat, and people are definitely having some more reaction than others. But the weight, the inflammation in the body, the arthritic pain in the joints, the poor digestion, the mental fog, depression, even dementia. Dr. Oz had a show a couple weeks ago where there was an expert on there talking about the wheat's effect on the brain, and they showed two brains, and one brain effect that was diagnosed with dementia, and one that when they had taken them off the wheat, what had shown up for them, and it was a complete reversal of symptoms. And there are cases like that all over. I mean, some people it's just about the wheat. It's messing up with their brain. It does cross the blood-brain barrier, and it attaches to the morphine receptors. It's a very addictive type of response. So people eat more, and wheat's in almost everything, and it's a big contributor to obesity and diabetes. It has a higher glycemic index than table sugar. Mm-hmm. It's just not a good idea to eat much wheat, and better to go 100% wheat-free, because then you'll have real response from reversal of those symptoms I described.
Fascinating stuff here to realize that, it's usually the small changes that a person can make that make a big difference generally, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really odd. We're living in strange times. It's, you never thought when you were a kid or all through the years I was raising my kids that, that I'd ever have a problem with wheat. And this was a new discovery to me, too, just a couple of years ago. It was like, what, really? But when I gave it up, everything changed, and I was really convinced after that. A lot of my symptoms were relieved from giving up wheat, and I've seen it happen with other people, too, other clients.
Fascinating stuff. Deborah, thank you so much for being on the program. Is there a website people can find out more about your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I do consultations for $50, and they can contact me at 503-706-0908, and that consultation lasts about an hour. And I have a therapy space I use for meeting clients down in Northwest Portland at 1316 Northwest 23rd. My website, my business name is Espavo Life Services, and the word Espavo is thank you for taking your power. And it's EspavoLifeServices.com. It's spelled ESPAVO, Life Services with an S.com. And you can access a health form, a consultation form, and email it to me on that website, and I'll be happy to meet with you at your convenience to schedule an appointment.
Very good. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. I feel better already.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
You betcha. And for those of you out there who want to find out more, you can also visit us at beyond50radio.com. That's the number 50, and we'll have more information for you there as well. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.